Hello, everybody. Welcome to this OLL live event. I'm Mark Lindros, and I'm a curriculum developer here at Oracle. Today, I'm presenting how to use Fusion Middleware Control to manage WebLogic Server 12.1.3 domains. Fusion Middleware Control supports managing WebLogic Server domains. You access the admin console by using the admin host and port followed by the server context of EM because it's enterprise manager based. And then you log in with the admin account used when you created the WebLogic domain. And in my case, it's WebLogic with a password of welcome1. And once you get inside of the Fusion Middleware Control console screen, you see a change center on the left-hand side, and then you've got WLST recording, you've got a tree control, and then you've got a general summary page. And this is obviously just a small excerpt or a clip of the entire screen. And then up here you have this control, and because we're at the, I think this is always a domain control, where you can click on it and it will give you a drop-down list of all the different utilities and controls that are available to you. And over here on the right-hand side, because our domain is selected, we have that same control over here. As you select different components in the tree, this control changes to adapt to whatever entity or resource it is that you're pointing to on the left-hand side. And Fusion Middleware Control supports managing WebLogic servers, clusters, and domains. And here you see if we select a cluster, you get a status, if a red arrow pointing down, if it's currently down. If it's up, you would get a green arrow pointing up. And you get startup and shutdown controls here at the top. And then you see that we've got that control just for the cluster. You also can manage your deployments. You can see how many are active and new. Just at a glance, you get a good percentage just by looking at them, their state and their health. And here you've got some controls for them. And this is a slide that's not really showing you all the different applications listed, and we'll see that in the demo. The controls, you get deploy, redeploy, undeploy. You can work with deployment plans, and you can start and stop your applications. You can configure and manage JDBC data sources. So you can create a regular data source, a grid link data source, or a multi-data source. And you can either create one from scratch that way, or you can select an existing one and say create like and duplicate it, and then modify some settings from there. You can delete your data sources, and you can filter and detach your control, your setting. And here we do show a list of some of them that are configured along with where they're targeted. You can manage JMS resources and modules. So something you might notice that's different here versus the other screen for data sources was that you do have JMS resources in a tab and modules in a tab, and you do have a list of what's configured in your domain, but you don't have the create button and all those other controls. So, but they do have a link here that brings you to the WebLogic Server admin console. So some of the things for Fusion Middleware Control, you're going to have to go out to the WebLogic Server admin console to configure some of those entities up, but you can come in here after they're created and work with them. Users and groups. So you can click on the Users tab or the Groups tab. You can create your users and groups in here, and then you can also manage membership. So you can have groups belonging to other groups and users belonging to groups, and you can configure that all within Fusion Middleware Control. And server templates. And like JMS resources, they don't have the controls for configuring that right in Fusion Middleware Control. So they provide you a link to the WebLogic Server Administration Console. All of that being said, where it looks like there might be limitations where you have to go to the WebLogic Administration Console, there are situations where certain things can only be done with the Fusion Middleware Control Console. And one of the best examples I can think of is OPSS-based security. So Fusion Middleware Control is very useful and oftentimes critical for managing WebLogic server domains that include upper stack products that are based on OPSS security or may do other things such as ADF or SOA Suite, so on, because they have certain underlying infrastructure that really Fusion Middleware Control knows how to handle those, and the WebLogic Server Administration Console doesn't. All right, so we only had one real slide for getting into everything. We're going to jump right into the demonstration. This is an architecture of the demonstration. So I've got two machines. They're really called host 1 and host 2. And I've got a node manager running on each machine. And we're going to use the Fusion Middleware Control Console. We're going to start up server 1. We're going to start up server 2. They both, and we're going to create a data source and target it to both of those servers and have them point to the database, which is physically on machine 2. I'm going to do a little bit more than that I have shown here, but that gives you an idea of what the architecture looks like. So just setting up. Oop, that one a little too big. Okay, so I'm going to be following along with this Oracle by example, which is a hands-on tutorial for using Fusion Middleware Control that we have on the Oracle Learning Library. Normally I don't show this, but I thought it would be interesting to show some of the prerequisite stuff that I already have done here. So as far as hardware and software requirements, the other live events that I've done for WebLogic 12.1.3, they involve just a standard WebLogic server install that didn't involve installing any of the upper stack or using RCU to configure schemas in the database for anything. But this one does, because using Fusion Middleware Control is pretty much reliant on Java required files. So here, software requirements, obviously a web browser and Java, and our database, because the upper stack requires creating schemas in the database. And then right here, the Oracle Application Development Runtime. I picked the base minimum that I could to get this working, so it's ADF and JRF in this infrastructure download. And then we get to prerequisites. Everything here needs to be installed. And then in red, I've got listed here, configure the schemas required by ADF using RCU. And I do have a set of instructions to go right to the docs to tell you how to do that in here if you follow along with this afterwards and play around with it on your own. So I've got all of that done already where all of this is installed. I've already run RCU. I've already got that all configured. I've got my node managers run it. So take that off screen. And I think I'll keep the chat up there where I can see it, because we don't really do much on machine 2 over here. Okay, so first what we're going to do is we're going to explore the interface a little bit. So if you come here and just go to the admin host port combination with EM, I know it was already there, but wanted to show it. Okay, and I've got my admin server running already. So here I just type in WebLogic. Looks like the password was saved. And initial load up takes a little bit of time, but then it speeds up. So I thought it would be interesting to not have everything up and running. So I've got a couple of clusters defined. I use this domain for a couple of different examples, so we're not utilizing all of it for today. I've got a dynamic cluster that we're not using today that's running dynamic servers, and you see there's nothing defined yet, and we're not going to start those. So that's part of the down section that's listed or shown here in the diagrams. Cluster one's got 2 servers in it that we're going to be using. So aside from the obvious graphics that your eyes are kind of drawn to when you first get into here, you have the change center that I showed before, and if I click on that, you can see that I'm in a development mode environment, so everything is automatically committed as I go through and change things in the domain. If it was a production domain or you turn this off, then you would have to lock and edit and activate your changes to release your changes as you went through. Then we've got WLST recording, so you can start recording at any time. You can view the recording and set up preferences to do that. And if you're not familiar with that already, that is a very, very useful way to get used to using WLST, because you can start a recording, and then as you make changes throughout your configuration, then you can go and look at the script. What it does is it creates the WLST script that matches whatever configuration you did in the console. Makes it a lot easier to learn how to do the syntax of Jython and WLST in general, and gets you a good starting point so you don't have to do everything from scratch. And then we get down to our target navigation. We've got our WebLogic domain listed here. It's called OBE. And admin server doesn't belong to a cluster, so it's just kind of listed here standalone. And we've got our 2 clusters. And if we were to expand that, you'd see the servers that are part of the cluster. And last but not least, here's that domain control I was telling you about, where you can access all of the different tools that are available to you in Fusion Middleware Control. So here we've got monitoring. You can check out all that different stuff. There's the support workbench control. You can start up and shut down your domain. You can access log files, deployments. So you get the idea. You get to everything. Trying to find. So security, it has its own thing too that you can get to. And you have a link to the admin console. So obviously this is all of this is quite a lot of stuff, and it goes way beyond the scope of a simple call like this. We're going to touch upon certain points of it just to kind of get the basic starting point going. And then here you get an exact duplicate of that drop down because we're at the domain level. All right, so here we can examine these different portlets that are displayed on this main page. So you've got summary, and that just tells you what the admin server is and some info about that. You can link to the admin console. You get a list of, so on the right-hand side, you see the clusters, and then under that's deployments, and then over here you've got servers and what servers are up and running. And everything's graphical, so it's nice for monitoring. And down here at the bottom, if you've got questions or things you want to explore, you can go to the Domain Resource Center, and you can follow these links and start learning about how to use some of the features of this console. So first what we're going to do is I have an admin server running, but I don't have, you can see in the server section here, that server 1 and server 2 are indeed down. So I'm going to go into I'm going to click on server 1 here. Get more details about it. And as you can see, I could have clicked on it over here in the navigation window as well. Or if I wanted to, I could have went here and I could have said environment servers, and I could have gotten to this page as well, or a similar page that would show me all servers. So if I do that, environment servers, to show you how it's a little bit different. And here we see a little bit more color in use, where we've got some servers that are in a failed, not restartable state. Some are running and some are shut down. Kind of makes for a more interesting display. And I can list all of my servers, and I want to go to server 1, which I was already at before, but I'm just showing you different ways that you can go around and navigate the screen. And I want to start server 1 up. So I'm going to click on Startup. And it gives you a nice dialog window that lets you know how it's going. And so what it's doing is it does it asynchronously. It's starting it up in the background. And you can see in my Node Manager window that it's indeed starting up a server. And it's asynchronously polling on that task until it completes. And you get an option to hide it if you want. We're just going to wait for that to start. When you have an upper stack product installed with WebLogic, it does tend to take a little bit longer to start up. And I can see down here in my Node Manager window, it says the server is running now, and then we do get that confirmed in our window here. So we're back to our screen and our server is running. Something else I wanted to show you is because we've selected a server, this control changed. Now we've got WebLogic server. And so as opposed to all of these different options, we've got the ones that are targeted at server level. Okay, so let's come here and we're going to look at the summary portlet. And I haven't had a support workbench problem before, so I'm going to check that out. Okay, it's not really telling me much, but let's go back to where we were. I thought it might have been interesting to take a little detour. But if you look in this summary portlet, you can get some information about CPU and heap, the Java vendor and version, just some basic specs. Then we can go down into servlets and JSPs, and other application components. So you've got servlets and JSPs, you've got EJBs, and obviously our numbers aren't going to be showing much because we're not really doing anything. JDBC and JTA, some JMS usage, response and load. If we had our servers doing any work, we would start seeing this graph change with some useful information, applications that are deployed and their state, and then you've got some options down here that you can use for monitoring as well. On this server, you could say what servlets and JSPs are being requested the most, so you can kind of get an idea of where your hotspots are in your application, infrastructure, web services, and we only have one. And we don't have any of these other services deployed, so we're not going to see anything there. But that's just a general look at that. And now we're going to start server 2. So we get both servers started up. And you can see over here on machine 2 that now it's going to start, it's starting up server 2 for us. And again, it's a little bit of a wait, about, I guess, 80 seconds, just about a minute and a half. We're actually going to see the startup message appear here first, the Node Manager window. And there we go. Server is running now, and we should see that appear here, and we do. And we've got all of the same information. And right now, all of this, it's unavailable because it's polling that information. It's going to populate. All right, so that's pretty much servers at the basic level. We can now take a look at clusters. So you can click on a cluster inside of your left-hand tree. And here you see cluster 1 is up. And you've got a control for managing your cluster. And if you wanted to, I started server 1 and server 2 up by themselves, but you could just say cluster 1 start up, and it'll start all of the servers in the cluster. And again, we've got a summary portlet, a tools portlet, deployments that are deployed across and I don't have anything deployed myself yet. That's why it just says internal and resource adapters and all of that. And we've got response and load, but this is at a cluster level. And then we've got a servers portlet here that shows us the different servers that are part of the cluster and their status. So you've got 2 green arrows showing that they're up. And here's something that's kind of interesting. If you go into the cluster drop-down list, you can say routing topology. You can click on that. It might take a little bit to put it together, but it actually comes up with a diagram of what your application looks like, what the architecture looks like. So at this point, we're looking at a cluster, and we've got our servers, and we've got our Oracle database. So it's a nice interactive diagram that shows us basically what our cluster architecture looks like. And you can click here and expand node types. And if I want to add some information, I could say, okay, I want to look at JDBC data sources too. Now the diagram becomes a little more interesting because I can see all of my different data sources that are associated and using that same database. And if we go back to hosts, you get to see all of the different hosts that are configured here. And these two are not really in use at the moment. Those are for the dynamic clusters, but we're really using host 1 and host 2 here. All right, so what we're going to do is get rid of that controller for now. And then you can use this control to change the zoom level. If it's just not too clear, you can change and zoom in on it. So here we're viewing by middleware. And you can change that and you can say view by host. And then you've got your machine. So it's correctly showing that our database is deployed on host 2 and that server 1 is on host 1 and server 2 is on host 2. And you have this show entire domain button. Might try to make this bigger. All right, that looks decent. Might be a little too big. So before we were looking at only cluster 1, and now you can kind of see like what the entire domain looks like. So we've got cluster 2 over here, which is DynServ 1, DynServ 2. We've got server 2 and server 1 over here, and the admin servers on host 1. The only thing that's sort of different is that DynServ 1 and 2, which are dynamic servers that are part of their own dynamic cluster, they're pointing to another host 2 over here, which is a different IP address, but it's really the same database. And if you notice, if you look at this, you see the little red arrow on the side of each of these shows that they're not running, when the other servers that are running don't have that red arrow next to them. Okay, so if you hover over this line, you can see the URL that's used to connect to your database. Or you can go over here and you can click on this. Whoops. I'm trying to. That might be what I was trying to get to. Okay. So if you hover over your data source, then you can get more information about your data source itself. And you can do that for each of your servers. And then there's a More button that you can click on. You can find out some of the folder structures and like what it's part of a cluster. And if you notice, the server has this little arrow next to it, so you can click on that and you can expand it and you can see what applications are deployed on it even at this level. So that's the routing topology view. Now we can go here and we can take a look at the MBean browser. And this opens up to the configuration MBean tree at the cluster 1 level. And you can pretty much browse and go anywhere that you want to go here. And this right-hand side shows the details of the selected MBean attributes. You can also go to operations to see any operations that are available on that MBean. And if you want more details, you can click on this Show MBean's information. And over here, for values that are writable, you can also change attributes. So this is what makes the MBean browser practical, is you can come in here and you see the access. It tells you if it's read-only or read-write. And you can come in here and actually change these values and modify them. I'm not going to change anything because I don't want to mess anything up right now. But you can modify it. And here for operations, you can click on an operation and then you can enter in what parameters are and you can invoke them. So you can set and use values directly in operations in your MB. So it's another way to manage your domain. Now let's check out deployments. So if we come here to our WebLogic domain control, you can click on deployments. And currently what we have are all internal applications. So these are all based on upper stack. When you install JRF and ADF, it comes with all of this stuff that gets deployed on WebLogic server. And so what you're seeing here is really a list of all of that. And here's our main control where you can deploy, redeploy, et cetera, and manage your applications. We're going to deploy a simple app by clicking deploy. And I'm going to say archive or exploded directory on the server where Enterprise Manager is running. And I have to browse to where it is. To make sure I pick the right one. And deployment plan, I'm just going to leave the defaults. I'm just going to click next to move on to the next step in the wizard. Now it wants me to select a target. I'm going to pick cluster 1, which includes server 1 and 2. And now here's a page where I can maybe change the name, or I can change the context route, and I can set certain parameters for the application. I'm just going to leave everything at its default and click next. And here I have some options if I want to configure some security for this application. And this may be OPSS-based security, where I might be able to set up some authorization policies and role mapping and whatnot for it. I can edit and work on deployment plans here. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to deploy, keep it basic. So it says up here, it gives me a status. It was successfully deployed. And now if I go to the application list, I find my Simple Auction web app. If it was there, I didn't see it. There it is at the top. Okay. So I've got my Simple Auction web app there. I can expand it, get more information about it. If I have it selected, I don't think I wanted to click on the link itself. Yeah. So what I really want to do here is just select the row. And once you select the row, then all of these different options populate and you're able to control them. And I'm not going to do anything. It's already started and running. I don't want to mess with it. But I'd be able to say, just like you'd see in the WebLogic admin console, servicing all requests, or if you want to stop it, it gives you all the different ways to gracefully or forcefully shut things down. And then you can click on Fetch Deployment Plan. You can click on Fetch. need to specify where to put the plan. I haven't really done much work with the deployment plans on here, but that gets the plan. You can go to the file where you put it, and you'll be able to work on the plan and redeploy the app with the plan and override attributes inside your deployment. Which brings us to JWC data sources now. So you go to your domain control, you go to JWC data sources, and we've got the ones that are already in the application or in the domain configured are listed here. So if I want to create a new data source, I can come in here and I could say create generic data source. So that's one way to do it. I can cancel out of that. Other thing you could do is if you want to create one that's like a data source, I've got one here that I've already got created. I could just select it in the list and say create like. And then I can set the parameters that I want here. So I'm just going to give it a random JNDI name. And most of my other parameters are set for me already. And here, this is all set already, or you could click Generate URL and Properties and have that generated for you based on entering the data in here, and then it would just populate it in there for you. All right, and we see the user is Oracle. Password is set over there. So I had to explicitly set the password, and now I can test my database connection. Invalid use, oh. Having the right password is valuable, which I forgot it was welcome one, not Oracle. And after you know you've got your connection settings right, you click Next. And if you're creating an XA data source like I am, you would click Supports Global Transactions. Oh, you don't have to do that because it is an XA data source. So this is if you're using a non-XA data source and you want to emulate and participate in global transactions, but are not necessarily using an XA driver. Okay. And I'm going to target this to cluster 1 and say next. And then this is just a review page, so you can make sure all of your settings are good to you, and then you say create. And here's our data source. You click on it, you go to its configuration page. And then you see, once you're in the configuration page, you have all sorts of different tabs to be able to see what's going on with your data source. And you see that we've got one running on each server because we targeted it to the cluster. And you can pretty much manage it the same way as you'd be able to in the WebLogic admin console. and that is data sources. So let's get to users. And the way you do that is go to the WebLogic domain control, security, users and groups. So here we've got a users tab and a groups tab, and it shows right now we see the users that are defined, the Oracle system user and this WebLogic user. I want to create one. And I'm going to call it J. Smith. And I'm going to give him a password of welcome1. Notice it lists the provider. And we only have one authentication provider configured for this domain right now. So that's the default authenticator that uses the embedded LDAP server that comes with WebLogic server. But if we had other LDAP servers configured, we'd be able to specify that as well here. So here I gave it the simple name and password credentials. We click create. And now we see our user listed in our list. Now we're going to click on groups. And we see the different list of groups that are part of a standard WebLogic domain. We're going to create a new one. I'm going to call it app admin. And again, we still only have the one provider, so it's going to be configured within that provider. And app admin, here it is. So I'm going to click on app admin. And I'm going to add it to another group. I want app admin to be part of administrators. So now this effectively will make the JSmith user, who's part of the app admin group, an administrator. So any privileges that administrators have, the JSmith user is going to have now. Now click here to go back. We've got a little breadcrumb trail. Now let's go to users. And we're going to go to J. Smith because we never made him part of the app admin group. And we're going to do that now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to test that configuration out. I'm going to log out of the WebLogic admin console, and I'm going to log in as J. Smith instead of WebLogic. And as you can see, J. Smith is an administrator and is able to come in here and manage WebLogic. And I don't know if you do anything with OPSS, but Fusion Middleware Control is the primary tool for working with OPSS. And OPSS is Oracle Platform Security Services, which is the security infrastructure framework used by the upper stack products for Fusion Middleware. So in here you'd be able to create policies and roles and work with system policies that are on a global level, auditing. It provides all these different security features, and they are things that cannot be configured in the WebLogic admin console directly. So it makes Fusion Middleware Control a required piece for any upper stack configuration. All right, so that is pretty much the basics for using Fusion Middleware Control. Are there any questions? And I have to look at the participant list. You can either put questions in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone if you've got a microphone, and you can just ask verbally. Okay, it looks like there are no questions for today, so I would just like to thank you all very much for attending, and have a nice day, everybody.